Hello. Welcome to Librarian's Day Off. We are coming to you from the Marion County Public Library expression booth. My name is Larissa Cason. I'm the library director here.
And I am Liz Buda. I'm one of the programming librarians here.
All right. So we haven't been here since November. We did not make a video in December. So what have you been doing since then?
Oh gosh, it's been a lot. Of course, we had the holiday season. So with our families, we traveled for 3 separate weekends to get all the holidays done. And now that that's over, we've been at home cleaning up after the holidays. And we've just watched the first episode of The Last of Us, which went up on HBO recently, so that we've been kind of just catching up on all of our things to watch and our video games and things like that.
Cool.
So, yeah, what about you?
Again, holiday time. I did some traveling in mid-December as well. And then with holidays, it was a bunch of cooking. So I like to bake. So made a lot of cookies, made several bundt cakes, which I am a fan of. I like making bundt cakes. As far as entertainment goes, one thing I've been watching recently, which is relevant to me, is on Disney Plus, National Geographic has a new series on Generation X. And I watched the first couple of episodes of that, and it's been really cool.
I'm going to have to check that out. That does sound good.
I like it. I love Disney Plus for paid streaming. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I am all about documentaries and the Nat Geo stuff. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about today, as far as Librarian's Day Off and what we do on our days off, Liz is going to talk a little bit about her hobby of stained glass, and I'm going to talk about my hobby of cross-stitching. So we're going to start with Liz. So how long have you been making stained glass?
Yes. So I only started actually making in about 2021. I joke that it was like my pandemic hobby that I picked up. But I've been interested in it since I was a kid. My dad took this class when I was like in middle school, where he paid to learn how to restore old church stained glass windows. So he paid to take the class to restore the window for them that they then put back in the church. But I was too young to take it, and I remember taking him, dropping him off, and like being super interested. So in like the fall of 2021, I found these classes just outside of Pittsburgh a little bit, where my parents live. And so my dad and I took the class together. Oh, cool. It was a 4-week class just on Saturdays once a week, and it was under $200 each, and you end up making a complete stained glass sun catcher about that big.
Wow.
Yeah, so we did that together, and before the 4 weeks were even up, I was already trying to buy my own supplies for at home. But yeah, so it's been about fall 2021 that we've been doing it. Now my dad's all set up with his own supplies too.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah.
There's another. I'm pretty sure that my friend took a stained glass class at MTech in Morgantown. I think it was MTech.
I know that somewhere associated with W, like their art center, they do some kind of classes.
Right.
I've tried to look into it, but since I'm not alumni or anything, it's a little hard to find out. But I know that they have, at least in the past, before COVID, that they did some classes there.
What is it that you like about stained glass?
I like that it's a little bit of like a challenging medium. I am the type of person who wants challenging things to do. I'm always wanting to learn a new thing. So there's kind of always a bit of a battle with it. You know, glass is a really fragile medium, and it's easy to honestly mess up. Like, if you drop it...
That's it.
Yeah, you probably broke something. So I really like that it's challenging, but you end up with, anything that you make, no matter what the design, it's just so pretty at the end. So
I'm going to kind of ask you 2 questions in one.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm interested about the process. I don't understand how it's made.
Oh, yeah.
But the second question, which you can kind of weave in there, is what kind of supplies do you need to start?
Yes.
Like, how do you get started? what is the process and what do you use the tools for?
So there's two different styles of stained glass. You've got like your traditional, what you think like the church stained glass windows, where between your pieces of glass, what's holding them together is lead came. So you have basically an H channel of lead where you kind of set the glass in. And that's one way of doing it is with came. And there's some lead alternatives now too, which is nice, but most people still use lead. Or what people know of as like the Tiffany method, which is using foil copper tape. So it's literally an adhesive tape. And you wrap the edges of the glass with it and burnish it so that it like really adheres well. And then you solder on top of that foil. So it depends on the method you're using. A lot of people will mix. So they'll do Tiffany method on the inside of the piece, but they'll put a border of lead came around it for like a little bit of extra durability, basically. There's a lot of tools that go into it, though. So I got really, really lucky when I was getting started and trying to find my materials that in the year of our Lord 2021, I found a ton of supplies on Craigslist.
Oh, wow.
For like $350, I got like over $600 worth of supplies.
Wow. Okay.
So a lot of the things I'll mention came in that for me personally. If you're getting into it just from the jump, buying everything brand new, your like startup investment is probably going to be about $500 though.
But, I mean, you're right. If you go on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, there's always people who are de-stashing
all the
their
time.
craft.
All the time. And I know that the stuff that I got was stuff that someone inherited from a family member that they no longer wanted to hold on to. So they never really used it themselves. They were just trying to get rid of it. But the absolute basics that you need is still a really long list. You need, obviously, glass, stained glass sheets, and there's... you can buy scraps and stuff online, even depending on what you're doing. And you can buy online too.
So the sheets, wherever you buy it, they're already colored. You're not like painting it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So they actually use minerals to color all the glass. So with COVID and with how like the supply chains and everything got messed up, you find a lot less pink on the shelf right now because pink actually uses real gold in it to get that color. And a lot of manufacturers straight up said, hey, we're not making pink anymore because we just cannot source the gold, at a reasonable cost. So, there's a little bit of that, but it all comes already colored. There's actually 2 glass factories that are driving distance from where we are in Marion County, which is super duper cool. I know one of them does do tours, which is the Paul Wisma Glass Company. They are located in, I wrote it down because I always forget the town name. They are in Paden City, which is like an hour 45 minutes kind of northwest of here.
Tyler, Wetzel County.
Yes. Exactly. I know that they do tours. I have not been to that one yet. But there is another one that is in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. And they are Youghiogheny glass. They're located right on the Youghiogheny River, right on the railroad trail too, which is really cool. So if you bike the railroad trail, you really literally go past the glass factory, which is neat. And I have been to that one. So it's really cool to kind of be in the warehouse and see how they do it. But to get back to the supplies, there's a lot of them.
Process,
So you have to source your glass. The first thing you got to do is get a pattern. A lot of people pattern differently. Some people will just trace their pattern with Sharpie or paint pens or whatever. Some people like to glue their pattern on. So you need markers, you need glue stick or like rubber cement is what a lot of people use because it cleans off really easily. Then you need your cutter. There's a couple of different types of glass cutters. They're called cutters, but they don't actually cut.
Okay.
What they do is they have a little wheel on them that actually just scores the glass, basically creating a weak point.
Right.
So once you have scored that line, you can just snap it. So you can, depending on the size of it and your glass, some glasses are harder or easier to cut.
Right.
You can literally just snap it with your hands.
Okay.
And then there's two different types of pliers. There's typical, you've got a running plier, which actually, it has a nice wide head, but it's curved on the top. So what it does is as it applies pressure, it does it in like a bowed arc, which splits that crack apart.
Right.
Or you've got what's called Grozer pliers, which they're also bent, but in like forward to backward. So you can use it to kind of at an angle chip away. So you need pliers.
Okay.
Then at that point, once you've got all your pieces cut, you have to take them to a grinder.
Really?
So it's a wet sander, basically. And those, a low-end one runs like $200.
Okay, so you have one now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and low-end does not mean low quality.
Right.
They're just smaller.
Okay.
So, you can get a good one for $200.
Right. If you're doing smaller pieces.
Yeah, if you've got really big pieces of glass, they have larger grinders that have a larger, like, work area, so that would be more ideal. So then you use the grinder. You need coolant for the grinder.
Oh, wow.
It's a wet sander, so it basically has a little grid on top, and you fill the grid underneath with water, and that water keeps it so that the glass you're grinding away doesn't turn into dust particles in the air.
That's like, people do that with tile, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're laying tile.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Okay. It's that same wet sand and wet cutting process.
Right. Okay.
And then, of course, you need personal protective and stuff. Like most people will wear a mask when they're cutting and grinding and safety goggles. Of course, you don't want to get glass in your eye. And then once you grind it, you've got to clean it. Cleaning happens like 4 or 5 times.
Right.
So you clean all of like that wet like glass goo basically that you've created off of it. And then once you kind of lay it all out, make sure the puzzle pieces like fit all together. And once you know that they do and they don't need any additional grinding or fitting, then you would wrap your edges with that copper foil.
Okay.
So you basically, if this is your piece of glass, right, your foil is wider than, so it goes over and then wraps around the sides as well. So you wrap every single piece, which I like to just sit in front of the TV and do that. That's like the one thing that you can like kind of multitask and like watch something or listen to something. And then once everything is foiled, you get to the point of soldering.
Okay.
So you need obviously a soldering iron, which depending on the type, those are one of the other more expensive items, but you can get a nice one in the $40 to $100 range.
Okay.
And then of course the solder itself, which most people use 4060 aluminum metal. Solder, or aluminum lead, solder. And that is also where some of that protective equipment comes in. I like to wear like rubber gloves when I solder, because you have to use flux, which any sort of like metal soldering, whether it's jewelry work or whatever, you need flux basically so that solder sticks where you want it.
Okay.
And solder is sticky.
Right.
Or the flux is sticky. I don't like to have that on my fingers.
Okay.
So I use a lot of rubber gloves. I also have like cut-proof gloves for when I'm cutting the glass and heat protectant gloves for some of the soldering work too. If you're going to be holding the glass while you're soldering, your iron gets to like 400 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you have a small piece, that heat travels and you can't hold it in your bare hands.
Right.
So all the gloves. But yeah, then I'm going to make it sound way simpler than it is, but you solder all of those lines. And once they're soldered, you clean it again to get all that flux off of there. And then you can apply a patina. So patina comes in 3 different colors. You can do black, copper, or a silver additional patina, just depending on the finish that you want. And that's another thing you have to wear rubber gloves for, because patina is a chemical that changes the composition of the metal, right? So if it can change the composition of a metal, you don't want that on your skin.
Right. So it's like glazing, but not, because it's changing the composition of the metal.
Yeah, it's surface level. You can technically like scrub it away, but yeah, it is like chemical etching kind of. Yeah. So then you can do your patina, and then you have to clean off the excess patina again, and then at that point you finish it off with literal polishing or finishing compound, just to get everything really like nice and shiny and looking really beautiful. And polishing is also kind of a part of maintenance of keeping stained glass pieces too. So if you have something hanging up in your home, you can buy glass polish and kind of keep up with it and keep it in good shape that way too.
So what are some of your favorite pieces that you've made?
Oh, I made these 2 pieces for my brother, actually. He had this really, really tiny house with these dining room windows that were literally like this big.
Yeah.
And he wanted like a matching set for in there. So we sat down and designed what he wanted. He wanted an iris and a pansy.
Okay.
So they're 2 matching pieces, and they're in the same style and same shape and everything.
Oh, wow.
That one pansy and one iris, which I will pop up a photo of that here. So that's definitely one of my favorites to date.
Okay.
But I have a really big project that my dad and I are actually working on together.
Okay.
Ironically, also for my brother.
Yeah.
He moved.
Okay.
So he bought a house, which is great, but the front door has side lights.
Oh, nice.
And they're full length, the full height of the door. So again, we sat down and we spent hours and hours designing these side lights to go in his new home. So it's going to be a very long project. It's 8 panels, and each panel is about 12 by 18 inches.
Okay.
So a ton of glass that's going into those, and a lot of work, but we're doing it together. So that's,
nice.
So that's really nice. But I'll add a picture of the design. But we don't have any single panel finished yet. But
so I mean, it's kind of like a physical thing. So is there like a lot of wear and tear on your hands?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got cuts right now. They're healing pretty well.
Yeah.
But you can see I get these little nicks, like these little guys too, that just kind of, they look like a pinprick essentially.
Right.
But glass splinters are a thing.
Oh.
Yeah. Wow. So it's something that you learn. And you know, some of those glasses are just really hard to break, or they fracture in different ways. So I was working with a new sheet just this weekend, and I found it just does tons and tons of splinters. Wow. Just the way that it breaks. And I have those cut-proof gloves, but they're a little bit too big for me. Okay. So I don't really like to wear them a lot of the time, because I feel like I can't feel what I'm working on, and like it like sticks off my fingertips and stuff. But for that one, I was like, okay, I really gotta wear these gloves. But yeah, it's a lot of wear and tear. The cutting process, the grinding process too. They actually have tools that you don't need to get started, of course, but they're tools to hold your glass so that you're not pressing your fingers up against those sharp edges.
Okay.
So there's something called a grinder cookie, which is basically just a puck, essentially, that you can press up against it. And there's another one I have called a grinder mate, which is a little bit of like a clip, essentially. So it has kind of a handle that you can use kind of in this motion. So there's things you can do, but it is generally pretty rough on your hands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have, what kind of tips do you have for beginners?
Start small. It's really easy to get excited and like go on Etsy or on Pinterest and find these like beautiful patterns that have like 80, 100 pieces in them. Or it's really easy to be like, oh, I want to put like all of this detail into a piece. But like, you got to start small. Start with patterns that are like 10 pieces. You know, even if they're larger pieces. If you're really into detail, a lot of ways to get good detail is actually by carefully selecting the glass that you use. For example, in the piece that I'm going to be making the side light out of.
Right.
One of them has an anemone flower, which if you know this flower, it has kind of like I forget the word for it, but where all the pollen is in the middle. It's like these.
Like the stamens?
Yes,
Maybe?
thank you. There's a bunch of little stamens in the middle. I am not going to piece out a whole bunch of stamens on a flower that's going to be this big, but I can find a glass that has a speckled pattern to it.
Oh,
so it can imitate those things. So keep it simple, keep your pieces big and few of them when you first get started.
Yeah. All right. Great.
Yeah.
Anything else that we didn't cover?
Let me see. I think that the only big thing, I know I talked a little bit about the glass factories,
Right.
but just to add a little bit more to that, you can go and shop at them too, which is really fantastic, especially because you can get basically offcuts. So my dad and I went to the Wisma factory last fall, and together we spent $60, but we probably walked out with like $300 worth of glass.
Wow.
Yeah, so when you go to these factories, Yakagani specifically, I couldn't speak for Wisma, but when we went there, first of all, the store side, which you do not have to be a professional to go into and buy from, is massive. It was like you walked in and it just opens up.
Right.
It's insane. It's beautiful. But when they make the glass, they roll it literally onto this sheet, and what ends up happening is you get like these rough edges.
Yeah.
So they cut those edges off when they are shipping glass to sellers. Well, they sell those offcuts.
Okay.
Or if there's a piece that broke in half, they sell that at a discount. They sell small pieces by the pound.
Right.
They sell like the big chunks of like slag glass that a lot of people will use in landscaping. They sell those.
Oh, wow.
Like you can get tons and tons of stuff there, like heavily discounted, which is great because we've got 8 panels at 12 by 18 inches.
Yeah.
So we got as much glass as we could from the manufacturer at a much heavily discounted price. So I would say if you're close enough, even if it costs you a tank of gas, you're probably going to end up on top if you go that way, financially speaking.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do have another question. What about social media?
Oh, yeah. So I made a TikTok account like back when, because you know, the algorithms, they know you better than you.
Right.
And I had found some stained glass artists that were on there, and it's like a whole thing to make these like ASMR videos of the sounds that the glass makes, like scoring and cutting, because it is a really satisfying like pop sound. So I was like, I could do that. I could just mount my phone and take some videos. So I do have a TikTok where I post videos, and I had one, this was back in 2021, I had one go like semi-viral.
Wow.
Which was weird. it was really weird.
Yeah.
And I say semi, it was like, it's a lot, I don't want to downplay it, but it was like 240,000 views.
Oh my God.
In like 2 days. Yeah. And out of that, of course, I gained like 1,200 followers and like all this stuff on TikTok, and TikTok is easy come, easy go.
Right.
But But there's like this whole, I don't know what to call it, like culture or community basically on TikTok for stained glass artists, both to learn together and also because they're artists who are selling as well. So you can find a lot of really, really cool small businesses and people who are just making things with their hands on TikTok, which is really, really fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear about all of your
my cross stitch
stuff.
Okay.
So I know you brought a few things with you,
I did.
but maybe before we get there,
yes,
I'll start out with, our basic questions. So how long have you been cross-stitching for?
So I'm not going to tell you how long I've been cross-stitching, but I will, I guess. I started cross-stitching, I was in my teens, so probably like junior high or high school, probably like since the early 80s, I'm going to guess.
Okay.
So a long time.
So you're good, right?
Well, I think so. But things have changed so much. I think this is true for all crafts, really, if you've been doing it that long. The way I got started way back in the day is just going to a craft store, and I don't even remember which craft store at this point in time, and buying a kit that had everything in it. And the way I started was actually stamped cross-stitch, which is where you have your fabric that you're going to stitch on, where the pattern of X's is printed in the colors on the fabric. So my very first one was stamped cross-stitch, and then I very quickly moved to counted cross-stitch, which is what I do now, which is you have just like a blank piece of fabric and you're counting the number of stitches and where they go on the fabric.
Counting's always...
I know.
I've seen where, now this is more, I've seen it in respect to crochet,
right?
But I've seen where people say in order to learn how to crochet, you have to come to the terms with the fact you might not know how to count.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, in cross-stitch, they always say, I think there are certain like cultures that say everything should have an imperfection because only like God or whatever deity is perfect.
Sure.
That's perfect for cross-stitch.
Yeah.
Because usually... sometimes you have to like tear things out and recount. Sometimes you just like go with it and work around it.
Yeah. I always say that too, especially the programs that I run here.
Right.
It's like, it's not going to be perfect. I'm saying that to people all the time. They kick themselves, and I'm like, it's not going to be perfect.
Right. Exactly.
It's handmade. You did it yourself.
Yes.
That's what matters.
Exactly.
So, so it's been a while. What is it about it that you enjoy so much? It keeps you doing it for so long.
Couple things. One, I find it soothing. I know people who crochet and knit might find the same thing. It's a little bit repetitive motion and it's soothing. I also find that it lets me be creative, but while following a pattern. Like, I don't have to develop a pattern. I can't do crafts like painting where you just like come up with something or something like that. So there is a definite pattern that I follow. Usually I follow the pattern perfectly. I don't modify very much at all. Occasionally I will modify a thread. If I get more ambitious, I will modify a lot of thread colors. But for the most part, I just do the pattern as written using the called for colors. Because I don't have that kind of crafting skill. But being able to do the cross stitch allows me to be creative in my way.
Yeah.
And I have a more analytical mind, so the counting, I like the counting.
Yeah.
Crazily enough. I like the counting, and just putting together a craft that way.
Do you have a project that's been your favorite so far?
Man, I don't know about my favorite. So I just have too many favorites.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a serial starter, so I probably have 20 projects that I've started.
Yeah.
And I'm also a process stitcher, so like when I finish, I haven't even like framed or completely finished everything. Because I just like the process of making it.
Yeah.
So I did bring some things. One that I really like that I did finish or did have finish is this one. Maybe we can put a better picture in there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
This is a pattern by a designer named Jeanette Douglas. And the pattern came from a Craftsy class that she did. So I paid for, this was several years ago before Craftsy, I think, changed their model. But anyway, I just paid for one class, Jeanette Douglas's class. This pattern came in that class. And it's stitched on linen, and it's a mix of cotton and silk thread. So it was my first time using silks, and I liked that. So when I show you a couple things that I'm currently working on and that I've finished, I have very eclectic tastes. Like, I like everything. So this is, some of this is what you would call a band sampler, because it has a different bands with different kinds of stitches. There's also beading in here, so that's why it was a craftsy class, because it has a lot of different techniques. A lot of what I do and what most people do is just simple X's and cross stitches, but you can do some embroidery techniques as well, which have different kinds of stitches, but then also beading and silks instead of cotton.
So then the idea with that would be any of those different stripes, you could take that and incorporate it into another piece, basically.
You could if you wanted to. Or, each band is a different technique and a different way to practice.
Oh, okay. Very cool. And then how do you get, I noticed that in the lettering, especially up top, it's like the colors flow. Is that done by hand, or is that with your threads?
That's the thread. That is what's called a variegated thread. So the thread is dyed different colors.
Okay.
Sometimes it's one color and different gradients of the color. This particular one was multiple colors, and that was that was the silk floss.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so it was variegated silk.
Yeah, that is super cool. I've always thought the variegated thread is so interesting. I see it in the craft stores, and I'm like, what would you do with this? Right? Like, the analytical side of my brain is like, come on, this is impractical, but it looks beautiful there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uses for it. Even if you're doing something with a house in it or something, it can make the roof look not so monolithic or whatever.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's very, very neat. I like that a lot.
So, a couple of the other finishes I brought just because it was the holidays, so I had this hanging up. Here's just a little tiny holiday thing. This was Armada Designs did this holiday stitch along where they release one piece a week for, 8 weeks or something like that. So that was fun. This one, I don't know if I love the finishing on it, but this is from One of a Kind Baby Design, and it says, "We wish you a Merlot Christmas."
That's
which
cute.
I thought was cute. But speaking of different tools, I got this. This had the fabric on the frame already, and you could buy it at Joann's or Michael's or whatever. It's a DMC product, or Hobby Lobby probably. So you're already stitching on something that's on a frame instead of just stitching on the fabric.
Oh, nice.
So
I assumed you just wrapped it around a canvas board.
No, you can do that when you're finishing something, but this makes it easy to do some little things that you can finish quickly. And then when I finished it, I just put felt on the back, and I put these pom-poms on here. I don't know if I love the pom-poms.
Oh, I like them.
Okay.
They're fun. I like it a lot.
They're on there now. So those are a couple of finishes that I brought.
Nice. And then, so do you have any, or I should say, what was the largest project that you've done?
Did I finished or have in process?
We can say have in process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll show you two, because there's two different ways. Where do I have it? There's two different ways you can think about a large project. Okay. So this one I have in process. It's from a company called Heaven and Earth Designs. And so your fabric is about 13 by 13. Okay. It's a little bit slightly bigger, but 13 by 13. But it's what's called full coverage. So every stitch on the fabric is stitched. There's no negative space, no white space or anything like you get in this.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah. So that is a lot. I have very few stitches in. So I don't know. So there are some people who will figure out how many stitches are in these Heaven and Earth Design things, and they can be 250,000 stitches.
Right.
I don't count stitches that way. Some people do. I don't. So, so there's a paper pattern for this, but you can also get the PDF pattern where you can use different tools to kind of manage reading the pattern.
If you had to estimate, how long do you think that would take you to finish?
Oh, God, I don't know. Probably the rest of my life. And I probably have 20 other Heaven and Earth Design patterns. But I don't know. That's the one I've started. Another one that I have in process that I really like, but I haven't stitched on it in a couple months. This one is from Long Dog Samplers. It's called Do Different. I don't know if you can see that very well, but just to give you an idea, this is the fabric.
Oh, wow.
The size of the fabric.
I love the color of it, too.
So this is a navy Zweigart fabric, and then again, I'm using silks on this one.
So that's almost a tapestry, basically.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. So these long dog samplers are big. Now, I have a border. I have a 2-inch border all the way around, but this is going to be a big one as well.
That's incredible.
So this is what I do. I start with a big blank piece of fabric and I count, and then you're counting, the charted stitches for that. And then, so for this one, I'm using silks, which are in a sort of variegated cream and tan color.
That's nice. The pattern reminds me of like the white and blue china too.
Yes.
I just think that's beautiful.
Yes. There are people who will take these long dog sampler patterns and break it up and do them in different colors or different. I have very little variegation in that thread, so you can't really tell. So anyway, this is why I have so many things in progress, because a lot of what I do is huge.
I was literally just thinking about it on my way to work today. Somebody said on the radio about like New Year's resolutions, right? And I don't do New Year's resolutions, but I thought, if I was going to do one, maybe like actually finishing all the projects I started would be a good one.
Well, I have some advice on that if you want to hear that.
Yeah, sure.
There is somebody in the cross-stitch world, I'm rattling all of this, sorry, that started several years ago, 3-4 years ago, something called WIPGO. So WIP meaning works in progress, and like a bingo board. So you put all of your works in progress on like this bingo board, and then with a goal. So my goal is usually to work on each thing for 5 days, but it could be to finish it if you're close to finishing it. So what happens is on the 25th of the month, she'll call out 2 numbers from a random, number generator, and then those are your focus projects for the next month.
Oh, that's fun.
Yes. So
it gets a little bit novel.
I know, it is. So it allows you to touch more projects than you might normally, and get further along in all of your works in progress.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really cool idea, especially the randomness of it.
Yes, exactly.
Keeps you on your toes a little bit.
I know it does.
Yeah.
So,
I know that would be like the way to find out which ones I actually care about, right? Because they would draw a number and I'd be like, oh, I really don't want to work on that. I'd rather work on this.
Yes.
It helps you prioritize.
Yes.
Probably.
So last year, one was called, and I was like, you know what, I'm never going to finish this. I don't like this project. I don't like the design. And so I substituted something else for the WIPGO, and then it's in a pile to be recycled somehow, like the fabric recycled somehow.
Yeah, I think that's better than just...
Right.
Better than kidding ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about some of the projects you've finished and what you've got going on right now. Let's talk about those tools a little bit more. So probably fewer tools than for stained glass.
I don't know. Yeah, probably. Probably. Smaller.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite tools that you use?
Well, one of the ways that cross-stitch has changed over the years is that, first of all, it's not necessarily all purchased in kits anymore. So you can purchase your fabric separately and then your flosses separately. So you can buy DMC flosses at all the major craft stores for somewhere between 56 cents a skein and 62 cents a skein, depending on where you get it. And that's for just like DMC cotton. And then there's all kinds of specialty flosses and silk flosses. So I have a project that's using some Gloriana silk, which is sort of like $8 a skein now. It's expensive. So, of course, you need like sharp embroidery scissors. You need good needles. One needle company is John James. Another needle company is Bowen. It's a French company, so those are good needles that I use. Mostly John James at this point, but either one, John James or Bowen. And then you need various hoops and stuff to hold your projects in. So I am a fan of what's called the Q-snap. So this is one I currently have on a Q-snap. So this is a sort of Halloween pattern that I have going on called the Book of Spells. So, you have the Q-snap that holds your fabric taut. And then just, fancier little things. A needle minder, which is magnetic, so you can keep your needle on your project.
I love those.
And you don't lose your needle and step on it or anything.
Yeah. Especially if you have animals at home.
Oh, yeah, exactly. These little things, these actually are for like spools of thread.
Oh, okay.
But it can help hold your extra fabric on the side there.
Oh, that's neat. I like that. I've always kind of just pinned up whatever is on the edge, but I like that though, because then I don't stab myself on the pins.
You can pin it up, but yeah, these little things are for spools of thread.
That's really clever.
Actually. Another thing that's like all the rage in the cross-stitch world, project bags. So people make project bags.
Yeah, they're beautiful too, all of them.
So this is from So Much to Love company that made that project bag. So, you don't necessarily need all those things. There's lots of different ways to stitch. So some people stitch in hand using the sewing method, so they don't use a hoop or...
Yeah, I've tried that. I cannot.
I can't do it either.
Just something about not having the tension. I feel like I am like falling all over the place.
Yeah,
but
I don't like it either. But there are people that do. So that's another way. Yeah. So I mean, those are kind of the basics you need to get started. It's just the fabric, the floss, some kind of hoop. I think hoop or Q-snap, your needle.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah, those are the basics. And if you're just getting started and you don't know if you're going to like it, just buy a kit. Because you can still get kits at craft stores. Yeah.
It feels like once you get it all started, then the slippery slope is just all the patterns and all the projects. Gosh,
all the patterns.
I don't have this color of floss yet.
I know.
Yeah.
The patterns are bad for me, so I'm kind of trying to not buy any patterns this year, but we'll see because there's already one. I bought one.
That's okay. We can just ignore that one. Right?
So I may have more patterns than I can stitch in my lifetime. But we'll see.
That's just a hazard of having a hobby.
Right, I know, it is.
Yeah. So do you do anything, of course, we talked about like protective stuff, obviously, for the metals and chemicals and things that stained glass takes, but I know stitching can be really hard just on your fingers with everything. Right. Do you do anything to kind of help? I know there's like compression, like gloves and stuff.
Right.
Do you use any of those?
I don't need to at this point in my life use anything like that. My biggest problem was with dry skin, particularly on my thumb. So in the wintertime, I'm trying to keep it moisturized because it can actually catch on your thread if you're not careful. So there's that. I've actually had more problems than with hands, is like sometimes with shoulder. Because it is like a lot of repetitive motion like that, or it can be. So, and then it's just making sure that your thread lengths aren't too long, because if your thread lengths are too long, then you are using your shoulder more, your rotator cuff more. And then just, taking breaks and things like that. Yeah,
all important things, but not always something you'd think of. Do you have any other tips that you would give a beginner?
I think that it can be helpful to have somebody show you what to do. Like you took a class.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to take a class, but if you have a friend, if you have a local needlework shop, where they can show you how to get started, or there's tons of videos on YouTube. So lots of cross-stitchers make YouTube videos, which they call floss tube. And so there are like beginning videos. There are two main types of fabric that you can start out with. And one is a little bit easier to count with than the other. So Ada, you're counting, one thread, you're stitching over one thread. Linen, you're stitching over two threads, so you have to count a bit differently with linen, or even weave, which is like Lugana, or there's some other even weaves out there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, not to get too far into the weeds. But if you're a beginner, it can be easier to start with a kit on Ada.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe watch a video or look online for some tips about how to start. But most kits that you buy, even a lot of patterns that you buy online, like if you buy a pattern on Etsy,
Mm-hmm.
or you buy a pattern, from a pattern maker on their website, many of them have instructions with what you buy.
That's nice.
So there are written instructions that you can follow.
And I think we have classes on Creative Bug too, right, for cross
We
stitch?
do. Yeah, there are Creative Bug classes. If you come to Crafty Connections, which is on, Thursday afternoon?
Thursdays. It's the second and fourth Thursdays of the month, yeah.
Yeah. If you come to Crafty Connections, if you bring a project with you, either Liz or I, we'd be happy to show you, or give you some tips about doing it. So, there's a very low barrier to entry.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So,
I think that's all I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, though?
I don't think so. No, I don't know. I spend a lot of time doing this, so.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
So before we say goodbye, we're going to talk about what books we're reading.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that's what we do. So I've got two going on right now. One of them, the audiobook, I'm listening to on Libby, but we also have the book. So Louise Penny's latest, World of Curiosities. So I'm listening to that one. That's pretty good. That is maybe the 18th book in the series.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. And then I've talked about this before. Everybody knows that I'm in the midst of Wheel of Time. I just finished the 8th of 14 books. But for Christmas, I got this companion book, The Origins of the Wheel of Time by Michael Livingston. And so the first part of it is like a biography of Robert Jordan, and talks about some of his influences. And then in the end, it's really like the myths and things that some of the Wheel of Time story is based on. So anyway, I'm enjoying that one as well.
That's really cool.
What about you?
So I just started something, so I'm not really in